All right, perfect. Ready?
Yeah.
This is my friend Hannah. Together with her partner Amos, they own and operate Carefully Curated Studios, which launched over 3 years ago. Hannah and Amos have their roots in Texas, but now live in Miami by way of New York.
Amos has a background in landscape architecture and urban design, and I've always had a knack for finding vintage things, and my dad's an architect, so I grew up a lot with like a love for interior design and art, and I'm very opinionated in that sense.
Carefully Curated is a design studio that offers services like landscape and interior design, but they've drawn an international audience through sourcing and selling vintage pieces online, like on Etsy, First Dibs, and their own website.
Down to a smaller scale, it's more of a lifestyle brand where we also are creating products and then also selling vintage furniture that we love. So it's very much in the name, like it's all based on the curation of home stuff from the outside of your home to the inside of your home.
So when people say lifestyle brand, what does that actually mean?
For me, a lifestyle brand is something that you resonate more with, like the mission, than you do the product. So
Okay.
for us, our version of like a lifestyle is curating your home and your space and your life, and using like incredible things down to a bottle opener.
When I think of vintage, my mind goes to record players, lamps and antiques, that 70s show, and your grandma's couch wrapped in plastic. But Carefully Curated showed me the broader scope of what vintage really is.
You've had like a bed from Milan that I've seen.
Oh yeah.
And like so many things that when I think of vintage, it could be a lot of different eras, right? And from all over the world, not just like vintage United States.
No, yeah. So vintage is essentially anything that's 20 years old.
Oh.
Which is crazy.
Okay.
Antiques are like, I think it's like 100 years plus.
Oh.
As it turns out, Florida is one of the best places to source vintage goods, and one of the reasons Hannah and Amos decided to pack up and move to Miami.
I mean, truly, like all up and down the coast of on both sides of Florida is insane sourcing. I don't know what it is. Like, I know a lot of the people from New York who have, who are vintage resellers. Like, what they do is literally come down here, buy a bunch of stuff, and then go back up to New York and sell it. We started in New York, and it kind of just kicked off during the pandemic. We were thinking about expansion and what that looks like. The market's super saturated there, and we hadn't fully fleshed out what we wanted to be as a brand. And there's so many like vintage resellers there, which is amazing. But I knew that's not the space I wanted to stay in. Is just like vintage furniture or flipping furniture. So we were trying to problem solve on like what it looks like to be kind of a bigger fish in a smaller pond.
And then you said, let's go to Miami from New York?
Yeah, well, we were looking at prices, and that's when things weren't so inflated. And I was looking at like showrooms and spaces, and I was like, we could get a lot for what we need for space. I knew that there wasn't much of a market, which is tricky. Like, it's definitely a jump, because I know there's not a lot of people here who have those specific tastes, but I know that it's coming and it's developing, and we'd love to be like on the cusp of that. Our customers, they're not here. They're just not yet.
Where are they? New York?
New York, LA, Paris, like we have Australia.
There is a Gothic vase that you had on Instagram, and it was a gloved hand holding this black
and
Gothic
it's woven.
vase. Yes, it's woven.
We just sold that actually yesterday.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yesterday?
Yeah, to a guy in Paris.
Where did you find that vase?
I actually think that I found that in an antique mall in between here in Texas.
Really?
Yeah. I find ones often like that, but in that shape, with that pattern, with that color, I've never seen.
Wow.
And it's one of those things that, if I feel like I have a visceral reaction to something and I'm like, that could be in a museum, that's what I want people to think of our pieces.
This photo shoot didn't just make a bold statement, it also represented Hannah's process for playing with different design styles and reflecting on what she valued most.
So when you did the photo shoot for that piece, what was going through your head in terms of your vision for where that would end up?
When we had that showroom, we had the backdrop that we were able to just shoot all the time, and my friends would come over and they'd shoot their brands, and I'd be like, oh, hold this, and I'll get a
while you're there.
shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was wearing her stuff, and I was like, this would look sick with this black face and the black
Oh,
glove.
cool.
And it's a very like rustic vintage piece, but I loved the idea of it being in this like modern setting with leather gloves.
Yeah.
In that period, it was a lot of like, we just moved to Miami. There's a ton of Art Deco here.
Yes.
There's a ton of that like pop modern, postmodern, lots of chrome, lots of plastic vintage furniture. And I was going through this phase of discovering if I like that or not. I like it in small amounts, but that's definitely not my personal style.
Okay.
So the vase was,
Okay.
the setting wasn't. The setting was
Got
so
it.
modernized for the vase, and I
Got
would
it.
like to put it in like, I see it in like a crumbly old building on a pillar.
With this reflection came an itch to create something one of a kind, while also moving beyond selling pieces that were just trend focused.
And that's kind of what we were doing before, just to like following trends to sell, obviously.
Right.
I mean, we love it, we're good at it, but like that's kind of what I'm trying to move away from, because trends move way too fast. I felt like a machine, just buying for what people like and then selling it, versus like people knowing what we like and why we like and purchasing it with that intention. I had a friend tell me when I told her about like, I'm having trouble figuring out like what our exact vision is, like who we are, what's our niche in the market, like what to draw from. And she was like, everything that you like get really excited about and tell me about and show whenever you found it is like exactly what you're describing. It's either like a super organic ceramic, or something that's really old wood falling apart but has this like essence to it.
Despite living in New York and Miami, it was ultimately the place they've known best that inspired a rebrand for Carefully Curated Studios and the creation of their very own line of products, Texas.
But what inspired the rebrand? Were you in Texas at the time, and did you like have a moment where you said, this is the time?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually, I was in therapy.
Okay.
And we were talking about coping skills, stress skills, whatever. And she was telling me about using this one skill of going to like your favorite place, real or imagined, and she was having me describe like all of these sensory things to describe my favorite place. She was asking me what it looked like, where it was, what it smelled like, what it felt like, what did it sound like. And as I was describing it, it was my favorite place in Texas. It's called Marfa.
This is Marfa, a desert town of 1,700 people located in Great West, Texas, just 60 miles from the Mexican border. You may have heard of it from the Prada art installation built in 2005, or when Beyoncé stayed at a ranch here in 2012. You might also be a fan of artist Donald Judd, whose work in minimalist, contemporary, and modern art can be seen on display throughout Marfa, including in the Chinati Foundation, which Judd founded and opened in 1986.
Donald Judd, my favorite artist, and like the reason why I feel like I do anything to do with like interiors. He's made Marfa into this just beautiful space.
For Hannah and Amos, this is one of the towns they draw inspiration from when they think of their roots. Soon, Carefully Curated transformed their Instagram narrative and inspiration photos from trendy vintage pieces to a bit more of the Wild West.
Describe Tex-Mex.
Truly, like growing up, it was like a lot of white German Americans from Fredericksburg, Texas, and Mexicans. Like that was like, those were the
mix
two,
of the
the
two.
two mix of people. I genuinely didn't even understand the difference between like Texas and Mexican like traditions until I grew up. In Mexico, there's a ton of leather, there's a ton of wood, like there's a certain type of ceramic that I really like. Then Texas is very like gaudy, like lots of leather, lots of grommets, lots of wood.
Cowhides or animal prints even.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's something that kind of clicked with us when we were trying to figure out our niche and who we are as a brand, is like we can only draw off of our own experiences, and that's what makes us most unique. And that's why we decided to make the whole branding essentially about like our version of what like beauty looks like.
So what are you currently making? Is this even out yet, or is this like in the process?
It's in the process. Nothing's out. We're close on a lot of different products, but right now we have room sprays, which are exciting. It's all made from a local perfumery in Texas. So when we're choosing scents and stuff like that, I think like, does it smell like when I'm in Marfa and I'm in the desert and there's a mariachi band behind us?
Wow.
Or we have soaps. It's an exfoliant and a soap all in one. And the felt comes from llamas.
Wow.
And there's a lot of llama farms in Texas. So
I did not know that.
It's actually, so it's made locally in Texas from a llama farm, and then it goes to a mill that they've been doing it for 125 years.
Wow.
We have a candle. Those block candles over there, they're beeswax. I want to show our customers how serious we are with creating things. Like there's such intention and story behind it all, which is something that just like drives me in general, is meaning and why do you own something? My favorite place in the world is the place I've been running from Texas forever, because I'm in a line with, I don't feel like a Texas person, but like it made me think like everything that I've developed, even though it isn't directly like a Texas aesthetic, it's through that lens. And I've just like altered it a bit to make it my version.